I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hillstring Gang, a Wrangle of 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Bloody Angola, and this week we are continuing this 50 Shades of Evil series, and today I'm going to bring you to Georgia, and I'm going to take you back to March 11th of 2005, because that's when Brian Nichols, sitting in a Fulton County Courthouse awaiting trial on rape charges, suddenly overpowered and hit his deputy escort, storms into a courtroom, murders a judge and a court reporter and a sheriff's deputy, and later that day, an off-duty ICE agent. A 26-hour manhunt ensues before Brian Nichols is captured, and that is only a small aspect of this story. So let's get into it. And we're going to start off in 1971 in Baltimore, Maryland, where Brian was born to parents Clothier, who was an IRS employee, and Gene Nichols, a business owner and a restaurant entrepreneur. Now, he was the youngest of two sons in this family. He had a brother, Mark, and Mark was 4 years older than him. His family was very close-knit. They were very large. He had a ton of cousins and aunts and uncles and all those sorts of things, and they would have get-togethers often. His family was very successful, and they were middle to upper middle class, and throughout the early 70s through the early 80s, that family would continue to see success economically. The Nichols family was very respected in the Baltimore area and pretty well known, especially with his father's relationship to those restaurants. And he was very well raised, a very mannerly young man, etc. Now, in the mid to late 80s, and really throughout his adolescence and high school, Nichols took up karate, and he really developed a passion for it. Now, in addition to working out, he was also very athletic. And around 16 years old, you could tell Brian Nichols was already a very imposing figure as it related to his size. He was 6'1". He was over 210 pounds, so much so that private schools would start to take notice, and he would attend a private boys' school where he was a standout linebacker. As a matter of fact, so good that midway through his high school career, he transfers to another high school that kind of recruited him, and that would provide him with more opportunity sports-wise. They were just a better football team. Now, in 1989, fresh out of high school, Brian attends a Division II college in Pennsylvania, and he walks onto that football team. He didn't have a scholarship there, and he showed some talent. But it's also at this point in Brian's life that these anger issues would kind of start to surface with him. Now, he plays on that team for about a year before having to leave the team after he gets accused of stealing. And he also had some scrapes with the law between the ages of 18 and 19. He would have a confrontation at the university dining hall where he picked up a threat charge. He basically was trying to get in a fight with this other guy. I don't know exactly how he threatened him, but he made some sort of threat and picked up a charge for it. He also had another incident where he was caught using a fake ID, and he even had another charge for criminal trespassing that earned him a 2-night stay in jail during this time. So it is with all this legal trouble, and these are just scrapes at this time, nothing huge, that Brian decides in early 1991 to enlist with his best friend in the U.S. Army Reserves. He does that. He ends up training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and at the age of 20, he also fathers a daughter with his college girlfriend. Her name was Stephanie. Now, shortly after his daughter's birth, that relationship does end. And later on in life, he would actually get in some serious trouble for some back child support issues. He apparently had like $13,000 that he owed in back child support by the year 2000 for this child that he fathered with Stephanie. Now, between those ages of 20 and 22, after he gets he's not out of the Army Reserves, but after he gets out of his training, and then you go for once a month and 2 weeks a year, right? He goes back to college, I'm assuming on the GI Bill, and he ends up going to a college called Newberry, where he continues to play football. But for whatever reason, college just was not for him, and he does leave college in late 1994 without a degree. It's at this point that he's kind of at a crossroads in life, not sure what he wants to do. He ends up moving to Atlanta, Georgia. When he moves there, he starts seeing some success. He's very successful, actually. He gets a really good job as a systems engineer with Hewlett-Packard, which was huge back in the 90s. And he also leaves there for better opportunity with UPS as a systems engineer. However, in 1996, trouble finds him once again when he's arrested for felony drugs, which involved just a small amount of marijuana. But at this time, y'all, it's the mid to late 90s. Weed wasn't legal anywhere. And so he gets in some trouble for that marijuana. Now, he doesn't go to jail for it, but he does end up with 3 years of probation. And he didn't come off of that probation until 1999. And from here, it really appears Brian was getting his life together. And look, this is not your typical thug, Brian Nichols. Very smart guy. Very articulate, came from a great family, as I mentioned, and very well put together. He actually looked at that time almost exactly, and I'm talking spitting image of Denzel Washington. I have a picture that I use in the artwork of this particular episode, and it's going to give you an idea of how much you would think this was Denzel when you look at this guy. Looks just like him. He was also, from all reports, very charming, considered himself kind of a ladies' man, and all of that is going to matter as we go along in this story. It seems Brian Nichols has figured life out. These scrapes early in life, a lot of people go through that. You go into college and things, and you do stuff maybe you wouldn't normally do. But at this point in his life, he seems like he's kind of figuring it out. He's flying right, and he's not getting into any significant trouble until August 19th of 2004, and he gets arrested for some serious shit. Now, he'd been dating this girl off and on for approximately 8 years, and she was a very successful person in her own right. She was actually a corporate executive. She made a ton of money, and throughout this relationship, they would live together. And incidentally, at this point in time, he's still in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, she took care of Brian. As a matter of fact, at one point, she bought him a BMW. They would attend church together. And even though they were on again, off again throughout their relationship, generally, they seemed very happy. They seemed like typical couple. However, in April of 2004, they do break up. Now, although they were reconciled shortly thereafter, it wouldn't last long. And what caused this breakup was Brian Nichols allegedly had been simultaneously seeing another woman who would become pregnant with his child. Uh-oh. No way to explain that one away.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. And when his longtime girlfriend would learn about this, she would end that relationship for good. It was like the final blow for her. Get out the door, don't ever come back. So from here forward, I'm going to refer to this young lady as the victim. And the victim starts dating another man after her and Brian break up. And his name is Chris. And Chris was a minister from a church that she and Brian Nichols would attend. And he didn't like any of this at all, meaning Brian Nichols. He didn't like her dating this dude. He probably wouldn't like her dating any dude. And Brian, as I said, he was a very charming, attractive guy, very well spoken. He was also kind of a narcissist. I mean, he was a little bit arrogant. He thought very highly of himself. And so this ate him up, that she was with this other guy who was a pastor and she was happy and he didn't like it. So Brian first tries to beg her to reconcile with him, does all the things, right? Goes to her house, please, I made a mistake. I'll never cheat on you again. All those sorts of things. None of that worked. Then he tried to threaten to commit suicide because he said he couldn't handle the breakup. That didn't work. She wasn't having it. She wanted nothing to do with Brian anymore. And those confrontations would continue to escalate. And in early of August 2004, he would start confronting not only her, but the minister outside of her apartment. In addition to that, he would also confront them when they were at restaurants and things of that nature, just always showing up when these two were together and confronting them. And that's going to bring me to August 19th, 2004, when Brian Nichols apparently lost his shit. And this is according to the victim. So around 5 o'clock a.m., Brian Nichols would appear in the doorway of her bedroom. This is, again, August 19th of 2004. She was sleeping, and he would point a silver semi-automatic handgun at her and order her to turn off the security alarm, which she complies. She does that. He would then bound her wrist and her ankles together with duct tape and tell her if she complied, he's not going to hurt her. And he would eventually let her go. But he would also say if she did not comply, he would kill her and then he would kill himself. And the way that he would kill her was especially crude. He would take lighter fluid, pour it all over her, and burn her to death. And Brian Nichols was serious about this now. So serious, in fact, that he had come prepared with 2 guns, duct tape, nunchucks, lighter fluid, and even a cooler full of food, which tells you he was planning on staying a while. He brings her to the bathtub, still bound, leaves the room, comes back and tells her that he planned to stay and assault her until her birthday, which was 3 days later, incidentally. He then pulls out the lighter fluid and he threatens to set her on fire if she escaped or even yelled. He then fills that bathtub full of water and submerges her at several points during the ordeal, basically putting this girl underwater until she can't breathe anymore and then pulling her up right before she passes out. So for 7 hours during this ordeal, he rapes her, forces her to give him oral sex, videotapes her as she was naked, just the most horrible, inhumane things you could ever imagine. And after it was all over, he warned her not to escalate the situation by calling police. As a matter of fact, he said, if you call police, I'm going to kill your whole family and all your friends if any of this is reported. And just prior to leaving, he tells her, quote, I'm out of your life. This is over for me as well. And this has put closure to our relationship, unquote. And he walks out the door. Well, the victim, being as brave as only one could imagine, she indeed calls the police, and a SWAT team is sent to the location of Nichols, and he is arrested for a slew of charges. Those charges included burglary, rape, aggravated assault, sodomy, and some other charges. And he is indeed looking at a life sentence just for the aggravated rape alone. So this is in the summer of 2004 that Nichols gets actually indicted on these charges. So he's arrested, but we all know when you're arrested, you have to get indicted. So it goes to a grand jury and they say, yes, there's enough evidence here to actually prosecute and get a conviction on this person. So that occurs, and he's in jail during this time on those rape charges. He's 32 years old at this point in his life, and he's held without bond at the Fulton County Jail. So he gets an attorney, and his attorney would later say that Brian was a very respectful guy, and he was kind of warm with him. Really, he was warm and respectful with everyone he came across, and that was his MO, right? Very charming guy. Just a magnetic guy who was denying all these charges against him. And he was so convincing, in fact, that this was not what it appeared and he was innocent of these charges, that his lawyer actually truly believed that he was innocent. So on February 21st of 2005, that trial starts. And it's during this point that Brian's normally magnetic personality, it starts to kind of change. And at one point, he asked the judge to use the bathroom during this trial. And he's in there for nearly like a half hour in this bathroom. And the judge is getting pissed. He's getting frustrated. I mean, you're holding up court here, and it's not just your case that's up for trial. And this judge tells his lawyer, he says, you need to go get your client, see what's up. So the attorney goes to the bathroom, and he walks in, and Brian is just standing there staring at the freaking sink. And the attorney's like, man, what are you doing? You got to get back in the courtroom. And that's fine. And he walks back in the courtroom. And the attorney would say later, it was almost like he was intentionally, meaning Brian Nichols, trying to piss the judge off. That it wasn't like he was stuck in the bathroom. He was doing this almost to irritate the judge. So we're talking about that judge, and it's important I mention his name is Rowland Barnes. And Rowland Barnes was not your typical judge. He was very well respected, had quite a reputation as being a very caring judge, a very considerate judge. As a matter of fact, if you were charged with a crime, you wanted to go in front of Judge Rowland Barnes because that's your best shot at getting treated fairly. So the trial goes on, and Brian would become more and more resistive. However, things would go Brian Nichols' way during this trial. So much so that after a 4-day trial, the jurors were hung. It was an 8-4 vote. They could not come to a unanimous agreement that Brian was responsible for this rape and all the other charges against him. A hung jury means that you're not found innocent, you're not acquitted. That's a unanimous not guilty verdict, but it means the case is over unless prosecutors want to retry the entire case. The judge announces this, and the prosecution says, well, we want to retry the case. And the judge, he's really pushing for it not to be retried. He felt like they just didn't have enough evidence for whatever reason. But the prosecution was adamant, and he says, that's fine. We'll retry this case, but we're going to do it quick. We're going to do it starting Monday. Now, at this point, Brian's demeanor really starts to change, according to his attorney. So on March 7th of 2005, that retrial does start. In the first few days, Brian is very quiet. He's not giving anybody any problems. He shows up to court. He has his Bible with him, and he's just behaving well. No issues. Until day 4. And the judge makes a shocking discovery. The discovery was made by the people that transport Brian Nichols, but it was brought to the attention of the judge. And that was a picture from the prior day, day 3 of this trial, that the people that transport Brian show the judge, and they had shown him 2 shanks that they had found in the shoes of Brian Nichols. So the judge takes this as a legit threat that Brian was planning to do something. You don't go to court with 2 sharpened shanks unless you're planning to kill somebody, right? So he starts rearranging the whole courtroom before Brian gets there. He has things such as water pitchers removed because that can be used as a weapon. You can smash a water pitcher right over someone's head and really hurt them. He even had lamps that were in there unplugged and moved. He requested beefier deputies to be in the courtroom. And the reason he did that was the bailiff in this case was a very short in stature and small female. And he's like, if this guy freaks out, I don't know that this girl's going to be able to handle him. And she probably couldn't. He was 6'2", 220 pounds, whatever it was. So on the final day of that retrial, this is on March 11th of 2005, Brian Nichols, who was still being held at the Fulton County Jail, he gets transferred back to the courthouse for this last day. So at the courthouse, there's a sally port, and that's where the prisoners who are going to be transferred, they go into the courthouse, and they don't just enter through a front door like everyone else does. It's in a back, basically like a back entrance, and there's a sally port, and they go through that sally port, and then they go through a secure elevator that only prisoners go up and down, and that brings them to the courtroom. And they're escorted by bailiffs or correctional officers. So this day, that's exactly what Brian Nichols did. He arrives at the courthouse, goes through the sally port, and at this point, he's going to be placed into a holding cell. And this holding cell is where prisoners change into civilian clothing for trial, because at trials, you don't wear your jail clothes in there because there's a presumption of innocence. If you go in there wearing Orleans Parish Prison jumpsuit, for example, it's going to kind of look like you're guilty already. Now, just prior to placing inmates into that holding cell to change, obviously, you have to remove their handcuffs, right? So they can put on their suit or whatever they're wearing. And this is considered the most dangerous time for bailiffs and correctional officers, because if a prisoner is going to buck up, that prisoner is going to buck up when those handcuffs are being removed. That's when the problems are going to happen. So Nichols was being transferred to this holding cell by a female deputy. And look, Nichols was a ladies' man, as I've told you, and this female deputy, she had been one of the ones that had been transferring Nichols back and forth from jail for quite a while. And they would actually talk and just conversate back and forth, nothing inappropriate. But it's interesting that the deputy later on would tell Brian Nichols' attorney she actually believed Brian Nichols was innocent. And in a weird way, she actually trusted Nichols. Certainly didn't think what was about to happen was going to happen. So on this day, her guard's down when she removes his handcuffs for him to go into that holding cell. And she did something you're never supposed to do when you enter that sally port. And that is that when she went to uncuff Brian Nichols, she still had her gun on. And so she uncuffs Brian Nichols, and for Brian Nichols, that was an opportunity. As soon as she uncuffs him, as a matter of fact, he turns around and he hits her so hard, he knocks her completely across that sally port. He then grabs her gun, and look, she's laying in the corner of this room. She just got laid out by a very big, very athletic man. She's practically knocked out in the corner. He calmly changes into those civilian clothes, and he walks out of the room. So there's a bridge that joins where these holding cells are, and it goes across, look at it like a skyway. into the actual courthouse itself. And he's in civilian clothes, so he looks like an attorney. And he has that gun, but he's not hiding that gun. He's just kind of carrying it. And he just calmly strolls across that sky bridge into the courthouse. Now, he's heading into Judge Barnes' courtroom. As he turns to go down the hallway to go to the courtroom, the bailiff for Judge Barnes happens to be walking the other direction. And this is one of his male bailiffs. And he's a big, beefy guy. He spots Brian Nichols. And he recognizes him right off as being unescorted. But not only that, he also recognizes right off that Brian Nichols has a gun. Well, before he could even react to this, Brian Nichols points that gun into the bailiff's face, and he says, "Turn around." Now, rather than beeline it for the door at this time and head out of the courthouse and make some sort of escape, he tells the bailiff to walk through the judge's office. And when the bailiff gets in the judge's office, surprisingly, there's several people in the office that were part of Judge Barnes' staff. Nichols orders the bailiff to handcuff himself and also to handcuff all of the people in that room, which the bailiff does. And as he's doing that, the bailiff fakes a heart attack. Now, why would he do that? Well, because underneath that judge's desk, there's actually a panic alarm. And the bailiff knew that if he could get to his knees, he could trigger that alarm because it was on the side, not on the side, but on the back of the judge's desk, and it was kind of hidden out of sight. So he gets down there and he triggers that silent panic alarm. Now, Nichols leaves the judge's office after everybody's handcuffed. He doesn't know that this panic alarm has been triggered. He walks through the chambers into Judge Barnes' courtroom while the judge is in the middle of a divorce case. And right there, on the spot, he shoots Judge Barnes in the head. 64-year-old man, kills him on the spot. He then turns the gun almost immediately after on the court reporter, Julie Brandau, and shoots and kills the 46-year-old court reporter. Nichols then leaves the courtroom, goes through the main door, and he goes down the stairs, and another deputy is giving chase by this point. Nichols makes it all the way to the bottom floor, but the deputy, he's closing in pretty fast. And upon exiting those stairs, Brian Nichols turns, shoots, and kills the 43-year-old deputy by the name of Hoyt Teasley. Nichols then exits the courthouse. He proceeds down the road on foot. And at this point, he needs a car, right? He actually ends up carjacking two individuals in an effort to switch cars, obviously, to avoid detection. Now, of course, with 3 murders occurring in this courthouse, the news picks this up quickly. This story is everywhere, and the heat is on Nichols, and his face is plastered on every TV in Georgia. So night falls, and Nichols, he's desperately trying to get out of Atlanta, but there are roadblocks everywhere. He finds himself in a neighborhood, and as he's kind of scouting out this neighborhood looking for a home to hide in, he spots a house with the door open, and it's like 11 o'clock at night. So he goes in, and he finds a man innocently working on his bathroom. He doesn't even know that Brian Nichols has entered this house, and he shoots and kills him, only to discover that this guy was a federal agent with ICE, a 40-year-old by the name of David Wilhelm. Now, rather than panic, Nichols steals his pickup truck, his badge, and his gun. But there's nowhere to go, y'all. Atlanta, Georgia is completely locked down, and there is a serious manhunt for this guy. Now, he does manage somehow to get about 30 miles outside of Atlanta, and roughly 26 hours later, after this whole thing started, Nichols breaks into the home of 26-year-old Ashley Smith. So he holds Ashley hostage for approximately 7 hours. Now, during this time, Ashley, who was struggling with her own issues, believe it or not, she's going through this ordeal, and she just had the recent murder of her husband. She would talk to Nichols about faith She would show him photos of her daughter, and she would really try to connect with this guy so that he would not kill her. And that's a technique that people just fall into. You've heard about the 3 F's, fight, flight, or freeze. Well, there's actually 4 F's: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And fawn is typically what females will do with men in an effort to escape a dangerous situation. It's where they fake feelings for a person in one way or another, and it worked well for her. As a matter of fact, around 9:00 a.m. that next morning, miraculously, Nichols allows Ashley to leave the apartment briefly when Ashley says, "Can I go see my daughter? If I don't go see her, people are going to know what's up." So he says, "Okay, I'm going to let you do that, but you got to promise me you're not going to call the police." What do you think this lady did? She got out the door and she freaking calls 911. So SWAT from several agencies, they show up and Nichols surrenders peacefully. Nothing else happens. He goes back to the Fulton County Jail and he is on full lockdown, as you would expect, and he gets charged with 54 felony counts, including 4 counts of first-degree murder. Now, while awaiting trial for these charges, Nichols at one point enlists the help of 2 deputies to plan an escape. However, his charm, it ain't gonna work this time, and his plan was thwarted and he was moved to another jail. Now, the highly publicized trial starts in 2008 before Superior Court Judge James Boyford. And after a 3-month trial, it was a long one, in 12 hours of deliberation, a jury convicts Brian Nichols on all 54 counts. So the state, in this case, they do seek the death penalty. However, surprisingly, when it was all said and done, the jury gets deadlocked at a 9-3 vote in favor of the death penalty. So Nichols ends up being sentenced to multiple life sentences, plus hundreds of additional years for the remaining charges. And the judge would state during the sentence of Brian Nichols, quote, "If I could give you more, I would." And I totally get that, especially considering Brian Nichols killed one of his colleagues. So when I talk about 50 Shades of Evil, this would be a good example of that right here. And something no one would really see coming. I mean, he probably would have gotten out of that rape case from what I understand and from what his attorney had said after. And he kills 4 people inexplicably. So today, Brian Nichols is in maximum security. He's actually in Georgia's Diagnostic and Classification State Prison. And today he is 54 years old and he is being kept in solitary confinement 23 hours a day for the rest of his life. And I think he deserves every single bit of that. There you have it. Another episode of 50 Shades of Evil. This time we went to Georgia. Not sure where we're going next time, but I will bring you another episode of it real soon. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Bloody-Angola podcast, commercial-free early releases and more. Thank you for your support to all the Patreon members. I could not do this show without you. I love you, love you, love you. And I do want to say this. This is the first episode after Easter. I hope everybody had a great Easter with family and friends. Until next time, for Bloody Angola, I'm Jim Chapman. Much love.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang.